Okay, I'll start again. So good afternoon, members, good afternoon, officers, and good afternoon, members of the public who are viewing. So if you could start the meeting and start with apologies for absence. I've received an apologies from Councillor Sweet. Yes, okay. Next, the minutes of the last meeting, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the committee held on the 17th of March. Do we approve these as a correct record? I'd like to move that from the chair. Yeah. Seconded. You all agree? We're just doing correct record. Are you saying it's incorrect? Oh, okay. Right. Urgent business. There is no urgent business to bring forward. Item 4, division of the agenda. Will not be necessary to divide the agenda. Declarations of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests, and non-registrable interest, including the nature and extent of such interest as they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Any members wish to declare an interest? No? Okay, thank you. Public forum. We haven't received any questions from the public. Move on to item 7, which is the leisure contract. Could I just remind members that we discussed this at length at the last meeting. I think we went an hour and a quarter. So quite obviously what we don't want to do is to have a rerun of the last meeting. Could I just remind members that it was agreed that at this meeting, not only would Mr. King from Fusion provide a short presentation, which will be followed by questions and answers, but in your questions, can we please restrict them to the following 4 items that we agreed at the last meeting, and that is activities in surrounding rural areas, secondly, KPIs, and third, carbon reducing / solar energy projects, and finally, pricing. Those were the 4 areas that we agreed at the last meeting to restrict discussion to at this meeting. There were also at the last meeting, and it's recorded in the minutes, various recommendations that came out of that meeting, so there's no point in repeating those. So I'll hand over to Councillor Hawkins to introduce the report and to introduce Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't really got much of an introduction because obviously we've been through all this over the last couple of months several times. A lot of discussion took place, as you said, at the previous overview and scrutiny, and also took place at the full council last month as well. Well, actually, might have been earlier this month. So I'm going to hand you straight over to Peter King from Fusion, who hopefully most of you will know. The one thing I do just want to identify is that officers and I will be meeting in the near future to see how we can improve the outreach of the health and well-being issues that we have got in the South Hams. I know that Peter has met a number of councillors who had got previous concerns. So we hope to bring that forward to you in the coming months. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Mr. King.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. First off, I must say I'm so sorry I didn't make the original meeting. Unfortunately, I came down with COVID that week and was really not very well. So my apologies, I wasn't able to make the previous session, and this has been deferred till today. I plan to go through around 4 slides in the deck that you've already seen, and I'll obviously allow enough time for question and answer afterwards. Also on the line, we've got the head of our community sport and community development, gentleman by the name of Chris Jones. So Chris is representing from our local representative, a lady by the name of Claire Bill. But Chris will be able to give us a bigger picture and talk a little bit more about how we're looking at sport and community development from outreach and so forth going forward within the contract. So if I may, I'm going to drop down initially to start on the summary page, if I may. So if we come down, here we go. Fantastic. I'm sure you've all read these. There's a couple of items that I did want to pick on within this. And I think a couple of the big ones are the bottom two. So we reviewed and have made amends to fees and charges that were implemented from the 1st of February 2022. Those fees and charges were done in partnership and in communication with South Hams Council. Within that, it was necessary to look at the charges that we within the sites in order to make sure we get best market value, but also to ensure the sustainability of the centres. There's a few things that have affected our operation this year, and everyone will know that will be utilities, that will be change of inflation, our consumables have increased, and on top of that, we've got things like national insurance increases and wages. So it was really important to look at the fees and charges across the contract and look at how that compared with competition. I know that will come up a little bit later, and I'd be delighted to answer more questions on that. The other thing to mention is during the time of the contract variation, we were operating under lower opening hours based on customer demand. Those opening hours of each centre has been increasing, and we're going to take a further increase from the beginning of May as the demand continues to increase, and you'll see that within the participation numbers as well. Those are just two items I wanted to highlight at the moment from the summary. So if I could drop down now, probably the next best one to look at is, can we have a look at the participation slide? So it's a bar graph. Keep going down, keep going down. And there we go. Thank you. So we're going to look at the next three slides. So I'm going to look at participation. We'll look at membership, which is effectively the bread and butter of the centres, and a little bit more about the customer service side as well. Is that possible to make that one a bit bigger? Let me do that. That's okay. So this curve really starts from January 20 and takes us up to January 2022. Obviously, you can see the dips in between, and we know the reasons why from the impact on COVID. Some of the things I did want to bring to your attention is back in January 2020, we were trading in the South Hams region. I think we're at 46, 49,000 in terms of participation. We have now continued to increase month on month since the reopening in April 2021. We had a dip in December for obvious reasons, and the two reasons for December was the outbreak of Omicron, and on top of that, obviously, is a holiday period. Since then, we've then bounced back to around the 44,000 mark in terms of participation across the sites. From February, that's continued at around 44,000, and in March has gone up again to around 45,000 in terms of participation. So we are on an increase, we are growing, and participation is growing across all areas. We are still trading below 2019 figures. We are still not back to where we were pre-COVID. But the news is good, the centres are getting busier, and we're increasing services along with the customer demand. So if I could come on to the next slide. Okay. Not easy to see this one, so I'll read it. I'm sure you've seen a copy of the report before. So a couple of things on here. We're probably operating now at around 80% of our pre-COVID membership numbers. And just as a quick reminder, that roughly the revenues for the centres are made up of around 60 to 65% comes through this membership line. One thing to mention on this one, actually Totnes membership is not growing in comparison with the other sites, with Ivy Bridge and Quayside taking the sort of the lead move on that. Whilst the membership's not been growing particularly quickly at Totnes, what we are finding is the pay and play, the activity numbers, and the participation is still improving. There's a bit of a discord between the two on that one. But we are still operating below pre-COVID, although we have increased again across all sites for March. Can we jump on to the next slide? So the next one, we talk about what's called Net Promoter Score, and this is the way of measuring our customer service. So Net Promoter Score is plus 100 is amazing. Nobody will ever run a plus 100, and minus 100 is absolutely horrific. We as a company set ourselves a benchmark to be around plus 20. Some of the key areas that you'll see that attract some of the, I suppose, the more negative items. So group exercise, that's a funny one because it also gets the really high positive ones as well. But as soon as we make a change to the program or we have an issue where you've had to cancel a class for some reason, it affects a lot of people very quickly. We have made improvements on that and we have got more instructors and more classes running. Staff level always is high, is extremely high. We get very little that comes through in terms of customer service items. That's not to say we don't have issues. That just doesn't come through the Net Promoter Score. And then the swimming pool is particularly well used as well, so they attract some of the positives. Some of the negatives at the same breath is group exercise. Cleaning is always a challenge, especially across changing rooms more than anything. We've made some significant improvements. We've just completed deep cleans in all the centres to try and get at the really high level stuff that we really struggle with. We're also recruiting now cleaners within our organisational chart for each centre. I've just attended a meeting this morning on equipment that we're able to purchase for the sites as well. So we are making some movement on improving those. And the last one, and I will pull out, is actually customer service. It's slightly masked by the fact that the staff one's high. I do recognise, I think we've got more to do from the customer service side. As we're becoming busier, customers are becoming more demanding, and also sort of the COVID, I don't want to say blame it on the COVID, that side is really gone now. We're back as business as usual. So those are some of the core items that are coming through from a customer service point. Those are the 4 slides I really wanted to pick out of the deck. There's just 2 things I did want to mention while we're here as well. One is, as Councillor Hawkins said earlier, we recognise there's more need for work within the local community, especially the outerlying reaches. So we're currently working on a scheme with the council to say, where is there a need and how can we provide that need? We do still have a lot of pressure on the finances of the facilities, but we do need to be looking at how we deliver that need, but also do it in a cost-neutral way rather than a loss-making service. And Chris, I'm sure as we get a few questions, we'll be able to come in on that as well. The KPIs within your report are the other item. The KPIs, unfortunately, have been very much affected with the COVID over the last 2 years. 2 things from last year, really. We were slightly down on participation. We wanted to be at around 400,000, actually achieved 54, we're off by about 54,000. We used at the time the UK Active Intel to set ourselves a benchmark. It was very much a sort of a finger in the air as we went through the COVID period. And out of that participation, you can see we were also down on sort of vulnerable or disabled users. A couple of items to that, they were also a vulnerable group in terms of COVID and have been slower to bounce back, but our programmes have been slower to bounce back in order to cater for that group as well. The rest of the KPIs for last year, the only ones that are outstanding, we're finalising some of the items on our quest to our quality management. So those were the KPIs in the report as well. And moving forward, we've had some positive movement on renewable energy around the centres. So I'm sure some of you have been involved with the discussions with the council. in terms of putting solar on 6 of the facilities, but 4 obviously in South Hams, through a capital investment project, which would service the centres and be part of the makeup of the buildings for really the next 19 years or the length of the contract. So I'll stop talking. I'll hand back to the Chair and answer questions.
Mr. King, thank you very much indeed for the presentation. Thank you. So members, start with questions, and just bearing in mind what I said a moment ago about the topics that we wish to home in on in this meeting. So could I have a first question, please?
Yeah, 2 questions. You said that revenue's not yet up to 2020 levels on our sites. How is that reflected across your other businesses, the other businesses which you run across the country? And the second one, I know we've had you and I had a bit of a conversation about this, but the price, you've agreed the pricing structure for your centres with both councils, I guess. Do you think that pricing structure will hold, bearing in mind that we're looking at probably significant energy price increases, particularly coming in October?
Let me answer both those questions. We are comparable on a national level in terms of the bounce back from COVID. What we're actually finding as a business, the outlying areas, so those not in central city hubs, are actually doing better. If we took our London business, what we're finding is the central London business has more or less evaporated. Of people are now at home, working from home, and got into a new way of working. The centres that are servicing a more residential area, and I would definitely class ourselves as that, have actually done better than the sort of the city centre location. We are comparable. We're about 80% back to where we were, and continue to grow. But the hard fact is we are still yet to achieve the previous numbers prior to the pandemic. So we are in line with the industry and other businesses across the UK. In terms of pricing, we really looked at this over quite a long period of time and tried to identify challenges coming up. And we talked about some of the challenges, utilities being one. There's 2 elements to pricing. We can only charge what the market are willing to pay. So there's no point in me saying I'm going to charge £60 because it's just not palatable. The market can't sustain that. We looked at legacy pricing, so those that were way below the current market value, and looked to increase that as well. Our anticipation and the way that we strategized at this time was to take a jump to bring it up to market price. But actually, I don't foresee big changes in the next few years. And there's 2 reasons for that. I don't think the market can support it, and our customers are already under pressure on their own finances. So all pricing is done in connection and partnership with the council, and we only do it annually. The next price review won't be till the back end of this year, and will be implementation between sort of January and March time. But I don't anticipate any changes.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. King, for your presentation. I have always wholeheartedly supported the idea that the council should be doing as much as it can to improve the quality of life for people in our communities. And, as such, Fusion are running for us what are effectively municipal swimming pools, and you do a very good job of it. But I have one significant concern, which I have mentioned at the previous overview and scrutiny meeting, but I will bring to your attention now. I think you have a significant issue with your pricing structure, with the fact that 65% of your business is membership. I am a district councillor. I should be a member of a Fusion facility, but I'm not. My local Fusion facility is Ivybridge. You've done a fantastic job there in making it a first-class facility. But I can join a private members club within 3 miles of Ivybridge for half the price that I could pay if I came to be a family member as part of a family of 5 with Fusion. And I cannot reconcile how we are offering what is effectively a municipal facility, albeit run by Fusion, for 100% more than I'm paying at a private club. And as such, I don't use Fusion, which is an enormous pity. But I think you need to be aware of that, and I think Fusion needs to be aware of that, because it is exceedingly difficult for me, as a district councillor, to recommend to people that I represent that they should be using the facilities at Fusion when I cannot do so because of the pricing. And I'd really like your take on that.
Yes, certainly. So there's a few things there. One is comparing like for like. So I'm not sure of the private club you're referring to and what facilities they're then offering. So that's one thing. You have to compare like for like. Swimming pools are incredibly expensive. They are fantastic. And the one at Ivy Bridge is the best there is in our locality. It is an amazing pool and an amazing facility. So it's really hard. Now, if you say, here's a membership of swimming, gym, group exercise, sports hall, comparable to the facility up the road that might be just a gym, well, the pricing structures are different, reflecting by the facilities and what you use. So that's one thing I will say. The other few items is we have invested across the centres around £9 million in improving the facilities, and that £9 million is yet to show a return on its investment. There is a commercial element to this as well. We have got to make the centres sustainable and pay back the investment into them. The other part of our structure, we offer concessionary memberships up to a premium membership. So there's different structures of pay level depending on people's status. And what we always try and do is if we can charge a higher price and offset those that can't afford the higher price, it's a bit of the Robin Hood cycle. So where we can charge more, we will try and charge more and provide a concessionary-based offer. And within the centres, we offer concessionary pay and play, we offer a daytime membership, we offer a swimmer and gym-only membership. So there's different layers of choice for different people. So those are a couple of items there. The other thing is it's accessible for all. You don't have to be a member, you can come and use it and pay and play. You don't have to sign up for a 12-month contract, you can join us for a month. You can be a tourist and come and use us for a week. There's lots of ways to access the facility. It's really hard for me to comment against a private club without knowing which particular one it is, what facilities they're offering, and what their structure is, versus the leisure centres. But ultimately, we did a price comparison of all the local market. We looked at what the facilities were and how we sat amongst that market, and believe we're at a very good value for money for the facilities and what we have on offer.
Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. King, thank you. Thank you for all those answers. I'm not trying to stop you from defending Fusion in the slightest. I think lots of what Fusion does is very good. I take note of the £9 million. I mean, I think a not insignificant proportion of money has come from this district over the last couple of years to assist with those sorts of things. On concessionary membership, that is great to hear. I would suggest to you, I'm not sure whether I can shoehorn it into one of the four heads the chairman has given us, but I would suggest that communicating that either through the website or through other methods is not done terribly well on concessionary membership. I mean, I would suggest, before you'd said that, I would have said that Fusion were halfway to being the new Robin Hood, which was that they were taking from the rich, but they hadn't quite got back to getting to the poor yet. So, I'm thrilled to hear that there are concessionary memberships available. It would be good for Fusion to better communicate that to people who genuinely need them. I can remember talking with Councillor Hawkins at a council meeting about Dartmouth and reopening Dartmouth, and of course he knows only too well that there are areas immediately near to Dartmouth where there is significant areas of deprivation, where the sort of people who will be requiring those concessionary memberships. So I do hope to see in future that it will be easier to know where they are and how people can access them. But I support in principle absolutely the idea of concessionary membership. Thank you.
So I do take your point, communication. I get that as well. So thank you for all your comments on that.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. I just wanted to know, do you participate in social prescribing with GP surgery?
Sorry, was that on social prescribing?
Yeah.
Yes, so we run, within the slides, as you may have seen, we run an exercise referral scheme. Always a challenge getting the qualified people to deliver the scheme, but we are investing in that. We will take self-prescribing, so if you meet the criteria, you are eligible for the scheme, and it's a discounted scheme over a 12-week programme. And we also work in partnership with all the health centres in order for them to refer people straight to us as well. So there's two elements. Yes, we do self-prescribing, and we can get referrals from the health hubs.
And I'm just curious, where does the funding?
There is no funding, unfortunately. The funding is done through ourselves. Effectively, we fund the programme. We use it. It's used as a sort of to get somebody on to the start and into the habit. But in other, I'll come to Jonathan. But there is no funding. It's all done by ourselves.
Mr. Parkinson.
Yes, I'd just like to add on that point, and it's something we can discuss further with Peter King and also Claire Bill. And I don't know if Chris is on the line, the national manager. Health funding and referrals is very much something we like to have partnership network with our health partnerships locally, county-based and regionally. So I think it is definitely something at the moment, all that cost for a referral scheme sits with Fusion. They get no other funding for it. So it's an area where grants or actually trying to tap into, health money from existing, health authorities we could tap into. And I know if Chris, I don't know if Chris wants to come in that on a national basis, because they have some very good examples elsewhere from their other contracts, but they're able to source in funding to help grow the scheme, extend it out, have more community-based referrals. So I think that's definitely an area we can look to target in the future.
Rather than continue the discussion on that, because it's not within the four categories, and bearing in mind that as a result of the decision arising from the last meeting, there will be a 6-monthly report in September, could I suggest that that be dealt with in some greater depth at the report to this committee in September? Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. It's a couple of questions. Three questions. I'll start with the fairly trivial one. In the report on page 23, and I hope this falls within the four categories, but it is in the report. There is this spread of dropout rates, and I'm a bit intrigued as to why Quayside and Dartmouth seem to have a much higher dropout rate than Tottenham. I mean, it's almost double. So, is there a reason for that?
I think so. I didn't quite catch the whole question. I think that was around the spikes in GP referrals. Was that correct?
No, it's to do with the dropout rates at Dartmouth.
Oh, okay. So I don't know if Chris Jones, are you able to hear me at all, or are you able to answer that query for us? So I'll just defer. If you can't, I'll answer.
Yes, hi Pete, I can hear you. I don't know if anybody else, can everybody else hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, can you just repeat the question? Was that on exercise referral or was that participation?
Okay, yes, it's not a matter of huge importance, and just intrigued. The dropout rates are virtually double in Quayside and Dartmouth, and I would just like to understand why that would be.
And was that on exercise referral? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done.
Yes, it is the exercise referral scheme. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, we've done a little bit of research on that, and I think Pete touched on it briefly when he started the meeting, actually. We've had a few issues with staffing and recruitment along some of the programmes, unfortunately, which has meant we've had some sort of delays in some of the exercise referral programmes as we've delivered them. And that's squandered a little bit, or hasn't helped really with the dropouts of some of the referral programmes, and that's something we've been working on over the last couple of months to improve that recruitment process, which will hopefully match up with the other sites.
Okay, thank you.
Second question.
Yeah. To do with customer satisfaction, I mean, you'll be aware of the various websites that try and monitor these things like Trustpilot and Indeed. which is more for employees reporting. It is appallingly low for Fusion, and I'd just be interested in your comments as to why that would be.
Things, rebooking, change of habit, change of ways using the centres, that didn't go down particularly well and attracted a lot of negativity as well. I must admit, I haven't looked at the Trustpilot for a little while. The other bit we tend to see, we also see it through our Net Promoter Score. If you have an issue, you tend to write about it. If you don't tend to say anything. So by their very nature, they do attract more negative comments than positive. But I'd have to go back and have a look at the Trustpilot scores.
Okay. And just a final thing about the outreach. I mean, it was more about the emphasis. I mean, I had a quick look at demographics of the area, and let me just read you a couple of figures here. 21% of urban city, 17% rural hamlet, 23% rural village, 30% rural town fringes. So if you add that up, I mean, you can just stay with the 21% urban city towns. This is where the leisure centres are. It means that a vast majority of South Hams, a good 80%, is not really being serviced by the. So my question really is: have you considered the fact? I mean, you said that you're looking at areas of need. Well, I would have thought the whole of the South Hams is an area of need, and currently 80% of the population doesn't appear to be getting much benefit from it. It's a huge shame, obviously, because I would just be interested in your comments on those statistics and what you are going to do to try and address them.
Yes, I think to answer your comments, I think there's three things we're working on at the moment, and I'll come to you, Chris, just talk about outreach in a second. So one is we're looking at the spread, geographic spread across the contract of where we are attracting users, so who is using the facilities and from what area. The second part of that, we've been making improvements to our programmes to make the centres more attractive. And a large chunk of that is very much around our family market, but we're looking at how the centres become more attractive through better programming. And the third item is we're also working with the council, as Councillor Hawkins said earlier, our outreach. We're looking at the needs of the local community and what we can do to help service those needs. So that's a piece of work we're currently doing. Chris, is there anything you wanted to add around the outreach of the outlying regions and how we're taking us out there, really?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I'm pleased to basically just announce that we will be looking to appoint a sport and community development officer focused on outreach. They will be working closely with Claire, working with councillors and the local authority, and obviously local partners, key holders, stakeholders and community groups to look to develop an outreach programme across the state, really. And I think the main thing to mention, like Pete has discussed, it's key for us that we look at developing a programme that's led on insight and demand, and that we can make a sustainable programme going forward. But yeah, I'm pleased to let you know that we will be appointing a sports and community development officer to look specifically at outreach, and that'll be their main role, is to be able to work at those community groups.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Spencer. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hawkins, did you want to add to?
If I may, Chairman, I really just want to emphasise that the Southampton District Council is a small district council. We have 4 major towns that are area centres for the parishes that are surrounding those towns. Our leisure centres have had a considerable amount of investment in the last few years. More investment is going to be put into them, particularly in Totnes, and we have that meeting with your good self and Totnes members in the next couple of weeks, I think it is. And we are very, very lucky to have excellent leisure centres that are serving our communities. The contract we have with Fusion, the outreach is in their contract, is very limited, and that is why we're going to look in the weeks and months ahead to actually develop that, because it's something that I'm very keen on doing. And we're going to achieve that, I'm sure, within the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chairman. Assuming I'm still allowed to call you Chairman. Thank you, Chair.
I won't go there.
No, all right. I thank you, Mr. King, for showing me around Ivy Bridge when I hobbled over and was walked around your facility, which I was delighted to do. At the time, I mentioned to you this issue of rural outreach, if you like, depending on how you define outreach. And I asked what percentage of your proportion of your users came from the more rural areas, and it was information which you weren't able to access because whatever reason, I can't remember, but you weren't able to access it. Are you saying you now can access it, and you can tell us what proportion of users come from some of the more rural areas, other than by postcode?
So to say other than by postcode, we know by postcode. We do know each individual and where each individual live. We're currently, and this is part of the outreach, we're currently looking at that penetration and what percentage of people are coming from which area. The item of work we've done at the moment is a bit crude. It's not really something I'd be that keen on sharing. We have looked at a software package that maybe we can present this in a better light and show the penetration into that location. There's a significant cost, unfortunately, with that. So I have actually just discussed with John Parkinson this morning if there's anything that we can use to put that information through another package with the support of the council. But I have all the information in terms of what that exact penetration I know where each individual is, and I can share with you the postcode for the draw of each centre. But is that against that population of that village? Not at the moment, I'm afraid.
The reason I mention postcode is because each postcode in this area covers such a wide area, geographic area, that it's likely to cover both rural and urban settlements. And I normally use PL6 as an example, which covers pretty much from Derriford Hospital right the way round to and including Bickley Village, and sort of saunters off towards Shaw Prior. And so in that sense, you know, the urban data is of no consequences to those who have concerns about what's going on in the rural areas. Sorting by town, which presumably any decent CRM system would do, would be just exactly what we're looking for. So I'm slightly surprised that there isn't a CRM system that does that.
I have the data, but not a nice, easy way of presenting to you the data. So we're just looking at the graphical form that we can present that back that makes it readable and usable. You can do it by town, but as I say, we've done a manual piece of work at the moment and gone through each postcode and said who's coming from what area, but it's too broad. One of the items you can do is you can drop pins, the exact locations where that postcode and that individual lives, but it does come with a cost. I don't have that item to be able to do at the moment. I'm just working on that and see how we can do that better. But I can't answer your question as I sit here now.
Can I go on?
please
Yeah.
do.
Sorry, I've just got two other things. I had a meeting with Claire Bill and Lisa Alford from Active Devon, and we talked about outreach, our definition being you coming to the residents. And a lot of that meeting was about getting residents to you. And I'm really pleased that Chris Jones up there is saying that there is now going to be a community outreach incentive or initiative of some description, because that's exactly what people like me as a ward councillor of a largely rural ward want to see. And I'm not the only one. And I think it's a really, really positive step forward. So thank you for that. There was no time frame given. So can you tell us when that's likely to happen? The appointment subject to procedures, I know is difficult, but...
Chris, I think you heard that. So in terms of appointment and increasing the SCD, got a
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. I think to be completely realistic, we're probably looking at, by the time we've got everything in place, we're looking from September onwards for the outreach position to be in place. But there's not, that doesn't mean that we can't put steps in place now to get everything ready for that period of time. So exactly like you said, if we get the insight and the data back to us, we can get that programme all ready to go by September, while we get somebody in place for that to support the programme going forward.
Thank you. I'm really pleased by that, genuinely. I've got one last thing, if I might. It comes under the heading of KPIs.
Yes.
Is that within your topics?
Yes.
At the last meeting, we asked for information about KPIs, which has been given. So thank you for that. I'm just looking at the KPIs at the moment, which is in the second part of what's on ModGov. And I'm just a little bit concerned that they're not particularly demanding, if I'm going to be honest. One of the KPIs says a more active district, but there's no measurement of what that means other than saying increased levels of physical activity. So if you get one more person involved in physical activity, that satisfies the KPI. Promoting community cohesion is another one, and it talks about increasing participation of target group members. I kind of get it, but I don't understand how these measurements are actually made. And there's lots. The other authority outcomes are listed. So there's no timescales involved. There's no pinning of fusion down to anything other than a kind of fluffy image of a target. And if you're aiming at a bullseye, if you're aiming at a target, you're aiming at the bullseye, not around the edges. So whether that's a question for Fusion or Southampton, I'm honestly not sure. But could those KPIs be strengthened?
Mr. Parkinson, am I right? I think these have been lifted from the contract between Southampton and Fusion.
Yes, and what Councillor Spencer's referring to is a very broad sort of high level of what those themes were, like increasing usage, community targeting. It's got some energy profile in there as well. What the table shows is more specific, the baseline data. So there was a table showing the 16-17 year one as the baseline with figures in there, and then you got targets against that, and then there's, I think in the last column as well, there's a sort of a target approach as well as to what the criteria we're looking for this year, 22-23. So when you're talking about the community groups, there's then a breakdown of those target groups, but those groups as well and those KPIs are very much from the Sport England contract sort of documentation we were using. So we've used that as the headline sort of targets to then have a table which is very specific to what we want to achieve through the South Hams contract. And hopefully it's that table where we can be more sort of honing in on what sort of requirements and the targets as well for that. Those targets are set year by year as well. So if we feel there's more to do or stretch it, we can look to achieve that in a partnership conversation.
Molly, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. So on the first point, Councillor Spencer, I agree with you. I don't see why we can't get the data out to the level that we need to see to show rural wards and parishes. So I'm going to make a commitment on behalf of Peter and John that at the next meeting, that the 6-month update, that we will have that data, that you can see the analysis by parish, by town, by village of where those people are, because I think it's eminently achievable. In terms of the second point and picking up on the extra officer looking at outreach, and linking to your third point about KPIs, what I'd like to see is when the next update comes back, if we're talking about recruiting somebody by September, I'd like to see some outcomes that we expect that individual to achieve, I think. So that actually, picking up on your point about KPIs and being woolly, I think it would be good to say, well, we're putting an extra officer in place at Fusion, so what is that extra officer going to achieve between September and March, and between March and the following year, sort of thing. So I think that's reasonable to expect.
Yeah, can I just come in on that point? So we submit an annual community and sport and community development plan. And part of that is a moving document. So it changes as things change. There are benchmarks that we agree annually for what we look to achieve. Those are the items that you're talking about very much should sit in that plan and then is reviewed alongside the council. So there is the right mechanic to do it and there's the right way of being able to present that back.
Unless there are any other questions, I'd like to move on to Councillor Cullen. Can I just make that, I need to move this item on because I don't want us to spend another hour and a half doing this. So, Councillor Cullen.
It's just a quick one. It's to do with youth activities, so I guess it's outreach young people. It's just a quick one. It's to do with the youth leisure nights. Peter, I just wondered, I noticed that you've got sort of wheels in motion on Overbridge, Dartmouth and Totnes, but I don't see a mention of Kingsbridge. I just wondered how that's going with getting the leisure night for the young people going in the third one.
So we did have a plan in place and unfortunately has fallen through. So we're a bit back to the drawing board on that. We are very reliant on third party support in order to deliver it. So we've got all the facilities, but not necessarily the right people to deliver with, let's say, challenged or difficult groups. So where I can use an example in Dartmouth that was led by Councillor Hawkins around the youth provision that's now set up there, working with this tray, isn't it?
No. Dartmouth Youth Group, newly formed
Dartmouth Youth Group.
We got our charity status on Monday. Dartmouth Youth Group.
But we're very reliant on the third party activity to help support it. Quayside, we are having challenges with finding that option.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to move on then, the recommendation on the paper is that we just note the content of the report. I think we really ought to do more than that. Just bearing in mind that we have a report coming to this committee on the 29th of September, that is the 6 months period. Can I propose from the chair that first of all we thank Fusion for the presentation, but also request that in the September report there be special attention given to the following. One, outreach activities in the rural areas and those areas of need, including the provision of data. Then picking up the point of KPIs mentioned by Councillor Spencer, and I think what came out of the last meeting, I think members would like to see progress on the carbon reduction solar energy projects, and then finally improved communication on the matter of the concessionary pricing. Those are the areas which hopefully the committee will be agree that that's what we want you to concentrate on in your September report. First of all, are there any other items that need to be added to that I've overlooked? I think I've picked up most of the concerns. So that being the case, are you all, is the committee happy to pass that? In other words, thanking for the presentation and asking Fusion to pick up to concentrate in their report, September report, the areas that I've mentioned. We all happy with that? Can I perhaps have a show of hands? Okay. Any against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Thank you. Right, if we could move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Better Lives for All thematic update, Improving Homes. Okay, so if we could start the item on the Better Lives for All thematic update, improving homes. I propose from the chair is that we follow the same procedure that we adopted at our last meeting dealing with the thematic update, in that in this particular paper there are 5 items to address, and that we take them one by one, starting with the delivery of the homes in the 3-year programme. And what I'd like to propose from the chair is that the way we deal with any recommendations arising out of this report, any recommendations to the executive, that we consider those at the end of the after we dealt with all the 5 items, and that in order that we come up with a recommendation that may hopefully have the favour of the executive, that we deal with that in a closed session, and then once we've sorted a recommendation out, we then return to open session. What we need to avoid is a situation that we had that arose at the last executive meeting, where it became a matter of perhaps the drafting of a recommendation coming from this committee. I think it's important that any recommendation coming from this committee is constructed in such a way that, first of all, it's understood by the executive, and secondly, hopefully it will find the favour of the executive. So if we could first of all start, so Councillor Mr. Pearce, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm just getting myself in order, because not having been able to sit down and get my laptop sorted out before the item, it does take a bit of time to get onto the right page and everything. Well, members, this is the first report you've had since Better Lives for All was approved. The actions are pretty much on track for this year. We're pleased with the progress, and you have the report of the actions in the appendix. Really, I'd be happy to take any questions from you. It's all there in the report.
Thank you very much. So we start with item 1, which is deliver local homes for local people that meet their needs. So could we restrict, first of all, restrict questions to this item only? So I'll invite questions for Councillor Pearce on this. Well, perhaps I could start then. On the heading, it says the delivery of 300 homes in the next 3 years. Presumably that is meant, that should be affordable homes rather than just homes. Yes, that is. Yeah.
It is affordable homes, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it will probably be more than that. But it's always hard to predict forwards, because at the moment there are building material price rises and all sorts of things that are slowing up the delivery of housing. But we believe it will be in that order.
Yeah. So the delivery of the 300 homes in the next 3 years, presumably that 300 in the 3-year period from September 2021, which is the date of the...
Yes, you've got the numbers there for the numbers that have been delivered. Now, the numbers to be delivered in the South Hams next year are over 200. I think it's about 265 predicted, but not only is it difficult to predict, but often the delivery falls just outside the end of the financial year, which means that it doesn't count until the next year. But I think what we can reassure you on is that the delivery of affordable homes has ramped up quite considerably from previous years.
So just going to the definition of affordable. Am I right in thinking that, as for the purposes of this report, affordable falls in one of three categories? That is the discounted marketplace, shared equity, and affordable social housing, so that we're clear as to what that covers.
The definition of affordable will be the definition of affordable homes as in the NPPF, and it will include any of the tenures in the NPPF which we are delivering.
So does it fall within those three categories that
Yes, and there may be more as well. Yes.
Okay. So would it be possible in the future reports to break that down into the different categories rather than just say the number of affordable homes?
Yes, the executive report will have the housing breakdowns in them as they come forward.
So in the next report to ONS, it'll be broken down into the various categories?
Yes, we can do that for you if you want it.
Okay, thank you. Right. Right. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder, I'm not entirely sure what additionality properties are in the key highlights, and again, in the looking ahead to the next 6 months. No doubt I should be, but I'm not, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine, Councillor Thomas. Additionality delivery is when the developers are delivering at a good rate, but maybe not selling off plan as fast as they'd want to, and Homes England have got some spare cash, then they come along and buy some of the houses off the developers as affordable houses that hadn't actually been agreed in the Section 106 originally. So, if you like, it's increasing the percentage of affordable housing being delivered by the developers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Snowden.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, two questions. First is, when is affordable housing actually classed as delivered? Is it when they're commenced, when they're finished? There's a construction over the places take a year, 18 months. When are they classed as delivered? And the second question, sort of following on from Thomas's, I'm assuming that as we are the housing authority area of South Hampstead. Apologise. Yeah, as we are the housing authority for that part of South Hampstead that's within Dartmoor National Park, can we just have clarification as to how those houses which are within the national park are counted, and delivered? I mean, are we counting them all in? There's a lot of nodding going on. So
Yes, we are.
Right.
We're talking about delivery in South Hams, and so that will include delivery in the national park as well.
Okay.
Although delivery in the national park, strictly speaking, I don't think will be in the joint local plan figures that come out for affordable housing, because it's only the joint local plan area. So that is a difference, but you've picked up on that. The first part of the
when do they class as delivered?
Yeah, okay. The delivery is when the developer hands over those properties to the housing association. So then there's a couple of weeks delay while they advertise them and get people in, but it's that's when they're delivered.
Any questions from members? Councillor Callahan.
Yes, similar one. Just are all the some of the schemes are not mentioned there, is that? Just ones that are mentioned are just some of them. I'm just wondering about the Red Walk one in Kingsbridge.
Hang on. Which part of the report are you in? Item one?
Number one, yeah.
But which part of that? Because there are a few.
Where we're talking about delivering 300 homes in the next 3 years. I'm just wondering if all the schemes that are coming up. Just clarifying.
No, well, we have
Is that
we have trajectories for schemes, and it will be the delivery date which is important. So for something like the Red Walk, that hasn't yet got planning permission, then the delivery will not be in the next couple of years. once we know that the builders are on site and when their completion date is, then we can put in a delivery date. So that's not coming. Well, I think from what I've said, the answer is no, yes. But if they do pop up, they'll be added on and they'll be additional to that.
Any other questions? Councillor Pennington.
Yes, if I may use this issue, I refer to the items under page 35. It could be any three of those items: community safety, crime and disorder, health, safety and well-being, and or other implications. Particularly with something that we promised as a council, and which is causing quite a great inconvenience and annoyance to our residents, and they're paying for it and not getting a service for it. And that is the collection of garden waste.
Councillor Pennington,
Which,
sorry,
just a
Councillor
minute,
Pennington.
I would want to,
have to stop
I'm allowed to finish under
Councillor
democracy.
Pennington, I need to
We
stop you.
agreed
That is
that
not
we would
on the
restart it
agenda.
in spring. Spring is now here. Nothing is
Councillor
happened.
Pennington,
I
please.
came out of my house this morning and I looked in my two bins. The black bin was absolutely cram full and the brown bin was absolutely full to capacity. It's not good enough.
Councillor Pennington, could you please stop?
Councillor,
Yep.
at the end there, you had an article in the paper this morning, didn't you, which I enjoyed reading, and you said it all. You said, yes, we're paying for services and we're not getting them. That's what's important to people out there. Let's get on with it, and let's get on with it quickly. They pay for it.
Councillor Pennington, could you please stop? Otherwise, I shall have to ask you to leave the meeting. Right, thank you. If we could return to item 1. Are there any other questions? This is page 39. This is page 39, yes. Any other questions? No, in that case, we'll move on to item 2, which is carry out an evidence-led feasibility study for delivery of affordable housing in South Hams. Would you like to say a few words about this, Councillor Pearce?
Yes, well, there's no point in building any houses unless there's a local need for them. So housing needs surveys are carried out, and those are then compared against the stock of affordable housing in that particular parish or area, and it's estimated whether the need is great enough to warrant building extra housing, or whether the current need will be absorbed by the natural churn in the housing locally.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Councillor Carr.
Thank you. It's just a quick question about, there was talk, I believe an email went out to parish councils a while ago calling for sites for affordable housing. And at the Task and Finish group, this was discussed, and I think it was mentioned that, yes, an awful lot more should be done to try and get people to put forward sites. Can I ask if what is being done in that regard?
Councillor McKay, I think I refer you to the key risks and issues section there. It's the resource requirement to deliver housing needs surveys at pace, and then moving on from that, where there is a need, it's actually then delivering on a site if there is one. But if you have a need but you haven't got a site, then even with all the resources the council's got, it's going to be difficult to deliver. So it's horses for courses. You don't need a site until you've actually got a need. And when you've got a need, the council will try and address it, but within the resources it's got. But it would be very site dependent, and that's when the parish council would be asked to look for a site.
That's okay.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I understand the horses for courses argument, but in the end, having a register of sites, which I believe other councils are doing would be very helpful. And yeah, I'm just surprised that we're not taking, more, doing more to try and to build that up. So that we can. And I would have thought that often, even where there may not be sites available immediate to where the need is, if you've got a register of sites, you can look slightly outside of the immediate area and use those sites if you had a register.
Well, can I explain to you one of the dangers with having an actual list of sites ready to develop? If ever we should drop the 5-year land supply, the developers will be out there promising great wads of cash to anybody who's got a site on a list, so that they can build houses on it. And they can then come in with an application. And if we haven't got a 5-year land supply, they're likely to get it. And so your site will disappear. So it's a two-edged sword, but actually finding a site when you know you've got a need is the best way of doing it, and keeping pretty quiet about that site until you have got a need for affordable housing, because otherwise the developers will be in there offering options on the land if there's any chance of putting market housing on it. No, it is, but when we don't have a 5-year land supply, it's open season. And you weren't on the council when we didn't have a 5-year land supply, but a lot of members will remember what it was like and what a bad place it was to be in.
Any other questions? Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, it's not so much a question. I'm sorry, I think we do this the wrong way around. The idea that there isn't a need for affordable housing in South Hams is quite frankly risible. There is need for affordable housing everywhere in the South Hams. And to put on this extra hurdle that they've got to do a housing needs survey that all costs money, time, usually by the time it's all done and everything, people have moved on anyway. I just think it's just not the right way to do it. I've got an example in my patch where somebody's come forward, gave all the sites available. He's a local landowner, farmer, gave all the sites available in his area because he wanted to build affordable housing. What do we come back with? Oh, do a housing needs survey. Well, it's just ridiculous.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Molly.
Just on that point, Councillor Brazil, I think I absolutely understand what you're saying, but my experience in terms of dealing with some homeless cases is, despite people being homeless, they still want to live where they want to live. So you would think if somebody had nowhere to live, they'd live anywhere in the South Hams. But that simply isn't the case. And so when we talk about housing needs service, if you're in the most desperate measures, nowhere to live, we still have individuals who say, I don't want to live in Kingsbridge, I want to live in Totnes. I don't want to live in Totnes, I want to live in Kingsbridge. So just building houses anywhere, people still want to live in particular locations. So I understand your point, but it's a bit of a dilemma, really, I think.
Well, if I may, then perhaps I'd like to do a challenge to South Hams District Council. I would like you to find me an area anywhere in the South Hams that does not have a housing need. Do it the other way round. Find somewhere that does not have a housing need, and we do not need affordable housing for young working families to live in. And if you can come up with that list, then fair enough. But I doubt there's a single place in the South Hams that is true.
Well, I don't want to prolong this discussion, but nearly all the houses built in villages now, if they're affordable houses, will have a local connection put on them, which means that they will be restricted to people with a local connection moving into them. And if there is nobody with a local connection, then what do you do with that house? Do you leave it empty? Now, we've just had a housing needs survey carried out in Birlston Parish, and a need came up for barely 5 properties. Now, if the minimum number you can really build economically is 6, so already we'd be building 1 more house than the actual need. But meanwhile, there's bound to be some churn in the local affordable housing. We've got 49 affordable houses in the parish. So with that, there's no certainty at the end of the 5 years it would take to build the houses that those 5 families would still be there needing the housing. Now, if there's a local connection on it, I'm sure, yeah, people will pop up and say, you know, they've got a local connection to Thurleston. That would have to be checked out. So actually, it's not as obvious, and I think Mr. Molyneux is absolutely correct that you do need to be very careful when you build these houses, and mostly building affordable housing in the towns is the best idea because the restrictions on them are fewer. And I think it's fair to say, in most cases, that people who live in the villages are prepared to go and live in their nearest big town if they have to. So if somebody from, say, Thurleston had to go and live in Kingsbridge, it wouldn't be the end of the world for them. And equally from any of the villages around Kingsbridge or the villages around Totnes. But it's quite right that somebody who lives in Kingsbridge will not want to go and live in Totnes.
Right, if we could move on then to item 3, lobbying for closing the business rate loophole. Councillor Pearce, would you like to say a few words on this?
Yeah, well, this has been quite a long campaign. What the history of it is that there was a consultation in 2018 for which the council submitted a response. And then it all went deadly quiet. So Anthony Magnol and I have raised the matter several times. I've raised it on local media and he's raised it with various ministers. And we've got it back on the agenda. And out of the blue, an announcement was made that from April next year, new requirements would start to be registered for business rates. And the default position is that everybody has to pay council tax unless they can prove that they have let their property for more than 70 nights and made it available for at least 140 nights during the year from 1st of April this year to the 31st of March next year. And it's the valuations agency that will be making the assessment, not us.
Will there be the need for legislation on this? I understand that this is coming through in a planning bill. Is that correct, or else?
No, this has been done by regulation.
It's regulated.
Yeah, this has been done by regulation, but nobody quite knows what the new levelling up. There is not going to be a planning bill now, but there is going to be the levelling up bill, which will probably be announced on May the 10th, I think, is the opening of Parliament, isn't it? So we should know a little bit more about it, but there's all sorts of rumours flying around, and I'm just hoping that some of them don't come through.
So it is subject to the necessary regulations being
this is already in course now. So from the 1st of April this year, people have got to be able to prove that they've been advertising their property, that it's been available for more than 140 nights, and that it will have been let for at least 70 nights in the next municipal year up to the 1st of April next year.
I see that one of the risks is the resources at the valuation office. I mean, what is is that a real risk that the valuation office will be unable to cope?
Well, we don't know. We don't even know if they're aware of it. So I've suggested that we should write to them and just remind them that they have this function, so that at least we've done due diligence. We can't do more than that because they are a government agency, Quango, and we're reliant on them to produce the figures. But as I say, the default position will be that you're on council tax unless you can prove that you've got a valid reason for being on business rates.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Chairman. Would it be fair to assume, Councillor Pearce, that we'd be using the valuation office figures as well on the line where it says about ensuring they're paying appropriately for waste disposal?
Internally, the council does that, yes. And one of the requirements for picking up the last grants that came through, the last of the COVID grants that came through, was that for holiday lets, you had to show that you had at least one commercial contractor's invoice for the last season. And guess what? The numbers dropped off considerably.
Thank you.
Councillor Brazil.
Just on that. I mean, but first of all, I mean, I accept that it's a slight tightening of the loophole, but my own personal view, and I think of this council when we passed the motion back in 2018, was that it should be closed completely. I.e., if you've got a domestic property, you pay council tax whether you let it out or not. In the end, they use our services: fire, road maintenance, police, etc. So I don't see why they shouldn't pay. We're basically subsidising people to let out their houses to make money, which I don't think is fair and equitable. But the other issue is the case of, these are business rated properties. So if it does work and a certain number drop out and become council tax, what's going to happen to our business rates retention because the government will look at us and think, oh dear, they're not doing very well. They're actually losing business in the South Hams, when in fact you get benefits and bonuses for increasing business in the South Hams. And has that been taken into account in respect of budgets and grants and things like that from government?
Councillor Pearce.
Well, yesterday I submitted an audit on second homes and the estimated number of Airbnbs and things in the district to Anthony Magnall, who has agreed to take it up on our behalf, and he will be talking to various ministers about this. But I think it will be recognised. They know, we know, everybody knows now that there is a high number of second homes in all the coastal areas in Devon and also in Cornwall. And so I think that because of the change, the government will be alive to the fact that there is likely to be some change in the business rate profile as a result of the new regulations.
Any other questions? No, in that case I'll move on to item 4, improve the overall quality of housing, etc. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you. Well, a considerable amount of work is going on within the council to improve insulation and to install air source heat pumps with government grants. Now, you can well argue that this is only a drop in the ocean and we can only do what we can do. But actually, the grants are available to a lot more people than it would first appear, because actually the financial limits are reasonably generous, and I know that lots of people who've applied have been surprised that they actually qualify. And you have some of the details there in the it's in the section looking ahead.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No. Okay, if we could move on to the last item, which is the homelessness strategy. Councillor Pearce.
Well, this has been considered recently at the executive twice, and went through the last and was adopted at the last council. So everybody has had a chance to see this and to know all about it. But if you've got any further questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? No. Okay. No further questions. What I'd like to propose is that we have a short adjournment to go into a closed session so that we can openly discuss any recommendations that need to go to the executive and then come back into open session. Are you happy to do that, members? Yes. Okay, okay.
Excuse me, Chairman, what paragraph are you relying on to exclude the press and public? You simply adjourning the meeting. You're adjourning the meeting.
Yes, it's adjourning the meeting. Right, I'd like to put the recommendation that's on the paper, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee note the progress in delivering against the Better Lives for All Improving Homes thematic delivery plan. I'd like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
All those in favour? All those against? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Pearce, for your presentation and for answering the question. Right, next is the annual standards report. Who's going to introduce this? Will it be Councillor Pearce or will it be Mr. Fairburn?
Well, it's got my name at the top of the report, but really it's your business standards. So I'm happy for Mr. Fairburn to say a few words on it because it's all there in the report. There's not a lot more to say. I have got a few more things to say about the independent person, but if you'd like to discuss the report first, we'll come on to the independent person afterwards.
Okay. Right, Mr. Fairburn.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Good afternoon. This is a report which I think it's the first time I presented this report to this committee, but certainly it's something that when I've been monitoring officer at previous authorities, I've done an annual report to standards committees. It's recognised as good practice, and essentially why that's so is that it's intended to identify any particular trends or patterns in the numbers of complaints, and also means that this committee can have an oversight of what is happening with regard to standards. What I would say that the report, because it's the first one that I brought to this committee, it does cover, in terms of the numbers of complaints, the last 3 years. And you'll see that there's generally an upward trend, particularly with regard to town and parish council complaints. But as I say in the report, you might expect that there to be more town and parish council complaints than district council complaints, because obviously numerically there are more town and parish councillors. We had an issue in terms of complaints being lodged about individual parish councils and receiving a number of complaints about a single parish council. Essentially, one or two councils can make up a large number of the complaints that are recorded there. What is also a noticeable trend is that, and it's not to say that when we've had those complaints that in fact they've all been justified. In fact, very few are justified. There have been very few findings of breach. A lot of the complaints that I've received, both in terms of South Hams and West Devon, have been about allegations that aren't standards matters, but are more to do with the decisions that a town or parish council has been making. And that is completely outside of the code of conduct, and with complaints in timescales set out in the policy. I've explained why that's so. We are taking steps to ensure that there is the requisite support provided to me, and that I have a fully staffed and legal services team to provide support in discharging the monitoring officer function. And as I say in the report, also there's the standards complaints are now being reported through or logged in the council's complaints process in the software, in the system there. So there's more of an accurate record as to where complaints are and what complaints there are. Training and development has obviously been on hold due to COVID over the last few years only. But hopefully, with the new code having been adopted, we will be doing some more training for members certainly following the new a new council next year. So I've set out trends. I know Councillor Pearce is going to say something about independent persons and may have one or two other comments to make. So with that, I'll hand over to her, if I may, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbairn. Well, in discussions over this paper, it emerged that, I was interested to know who the independent person was, first of all, because I haven't had much to do with standards, because it's, overview and scrutiny's realm at the moment. And so this made Mr. Fairbairn kind of investigate the position, and we found that, in fact, it wasn't entirely as it should be. Now, there are legal requirements for appointing independent persons, and Section 28 of the Localism Act 2011 requires the council to appoint at least one independent person whose views must be sought and taken into account before making decisions on alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct that the council has decided to investigate. The independent persons also have a role to play in the procedures that must be followed before the head of paid service, monitoring officer or Section 151 officer can be dismissed. Let's hope we never have to consult them on that. Now, a person may not be appointed as an independent person unless the vacancy for an independent person has been advertised in such manner as the authority considers is likely to bring it to the attention of the public. The person has submitted an application to fill the vacancy to the authority. And lastly, that the person's appointment has been approved by a majority of the members of the authority. So at present, the council has, as I understand it, 3 independent persons. There is one appointed in November 2012 and reappointed from November 2015 to May 2019, and that was approved by council in 2015. And then a further 2 who were appointed from December 2017 to May 2019, and that was approved by council in 2017. Now, there are a further 2, but I think those are for West Devon. No, they're not. They're all ours, are they? They're all, oh, well, there are a further 2 then, appointed from May 2019 to May 2023, and they were appointed in 2019. Now, so the details of this are not terribly important, but you can see that there's a bit of a hodgepodge going on. The 2 who were appointed from 2017 to 2019 were originally appointed following adverts in the local press as well as on the council's website. A recruitment pack was created, which amongst other things set out the requirements to be an independent person and clear instructions for making an application. 12 applications were received and a formal interview process was followed. Now, it's assumed that the original appointments followed the same or a similar process carried out by the council, or in the case of the 2 who were appointed in May 2019, and they were independent persons for West Devon at that stage by West Devon. However, it's not wholly convincing from the reports and minutes that the appointment made in 2015 necessarily did follow that process. So, although West Devon appointed the 2 from May 2019, and the report to Overview and Scrutiny panel recommending the appointment of these 2 refers to the existing independent persons needing to be reappointed in May 2019, the council appears not to have done so. And the report to council in May 2019 makes no mention of the other 3 independent persons. However, they have continued in post, so apparently they haven't been officially appointed at the moment. In May 2019, council agreed that all appointed independent persons be in receipt of regular performance reviews. The independent persons each receive an annual allowance of £500. So clearly, there's a bit of a historical problem with regards to the ongoing appointment of 3 of the 5 independent persons that needs to be rectified as soon as possible. While a further issue with the standards arrangements is unwelcome, as the next meeting of the council is the annual meeting, when hopefully the council will also agree the revised process for dealing with the code of conduct complaints. The timing is favourable for providing an immediate solution. So, our suggestion, that's Mr. Fairbairn and I, is that you should propose the following recommendation to council. Tanis, could we have that up on the screen, please? Thanks. So that's the recommendation, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommends the full council to ratify the appointment of George Barnicott, Trevor Kirkin, they're the 2 who were appointed for 2 years only, and Peter Boreham, he was, hang on, wait a minute, let me get this right. Oh no, Mr. Barnicott was the one who was appointed in 2012 and then reappointed from 2015 to 2019, and the other 2 were appointed in 2017 to May 2019, but then apparently subsequently weren't reappointed. So we want to regularise this because we have 2 members who have been regularly appointed up to 2023. And then we will have all 5 of them appointed up to 2023. From whence a new council can take off and do what it will in reappointing them or finding some others or doing what it wants to do. But so that is what I have to recommend to you today to take on. I think the chairman is on board with this because you have had a discussion, haven't you?
Can I suggest that we deal with this straight away? Thank you, Councillor Pearce, for putting us in the picture on this, and thank you for the putting forward the proposed recommendation. I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Right. Do any members wish to either ask a question or comment? Councillor Spencer.
Or to be a pain, I understand why you're saying what you're saying, but I don't know anything about these 3 people, and you're asking me to agree to their appointment without me knowing anything at all about them, what they do, their qualifications for the post, or anything. I know they're in situ, or perhaps they're not, but and I know what you're trying to do, but I'm extremely reluctant to go along with this proposal at all without knowing more about the people involved.
Councillor Pearce or Mr. Fairbairn, can you provide Councillor Spencer with some further information? Am I right in thinking, I think these have been, in the past, they have been, their proposed appointment has gone through the procedure, just as it hasn't been the complete procedure?
Chairman, yeah, that's largely correct. They've been through a process. They've been through an advertisement process, an interview process, and they've been selected. They've been appointed by council on previous occasions. It's just that in May 2019, some reason, when appointing the 2 independent persons from West Devon, the independent persons for South Hams, their 3 names did not get included in the report, and therefore they've gone through a process. Absolutely, yes, absolutely, and they've demonstrated that they're competent to do it in terms of what they've been doing over the period. Certainly, I've dealt with 1 or 2 of them, and they've been fine. So.
And they've been paid.
Are we sure? Are we sure?
Did I say? Okay, well, right. Okay. Right, this recommendation has been proposed, has been seconded. Any others? No? Can we proceed to the vote then? All those in favour? No, well, in that case, could you hold fire until we dealt with this, please, Councillor Pennington? We're voting on the recommendation that's on the screen, yes? Okay. All those in favour? Okay.
No.
No.
Oh, did I miss?
Anybody against? You're abstaining. Okay, thank you. Right, we've dealt with that. Can we return to the main body of the report? And that I would ask for questions of Mr. Fairburn respect of his report. If I could start with a question. At 214 of the report, you make reference to the approval that was obtained for employing 2 full-time lawyers. And then that report follows by saying, unfortunately, since then, 2 have left the employment of this council. So on the face of it, this council is, there's a shortfall of 4 lawyers. My first question is, how are matters going in recruiting the 2 that were approved by council? And secondly, what steps are being taken to recruit those that have left? In other words, how is it intended to fill the 4 vacancies that we have, which clearly have had an impact, we're going to have an impact on the future performance in respect of, I presume, not just standards, but other areas as well?
Yeah, Chairman. In actual fact, there's 5 vacancies, because that's masking the fact that my original post, because I was appointed as a senior legal specialist, that has not been filled since I was appointed as head of legal services. So there are 5 vacancies within legal services. At present, they are 4 of them are filled with by locums, part-time generally. But we have advertised to fill 4 of the posts, and disappointingly, we received single application, and that application was in respect from somebody who had no planning experience whatsoever, and yet it was an application for a planning lawyer. So the market is extremely tight. So we are looking at what else we can do by way of means of attracting. In the past, we'd have relied on the fact we worked flexibly and could work remotely. But of course, over the last 2.5 years, everybody can do that. So that's no longer an advantage. So it is a very challenging workplace out there, employment. But I have a meeting next week with the chief executive, and with a view to deciding where we go to next. But yeah, it's a challenging time.
Can I follow up that question? Has consideration been given to putting some of the legal work out to tender and inviting firms of solicitors to tender for this work, as happens in other local authorities? Has consideration been given to that as a way of addressing the shortage? And if it hasn't been given consideration, will it be given consideration?
At present, we are also putting work out to firms. Section 106 agreements, for example, are presently outsourced. They are effectively cost neutral to the council, because ultimately the developer or the applicant pays the legal fees of the external lawyers. Standards have been outsourced effectively to Cornwall, who carry out the initial assessment for us. So we are outsourcing various bits of work. We've not as yet got to the point when we need to think about outsourcing more of the work. But yeah, as is always the case, it's always one of those options. It is something that was considered as part of the legal services review. But it's not a particularly attractive option in terms of client relationships. Can be more difficult. There are advantages to having an in-house team, particularly working over the 2 authorities. But yeah, we will consider a number of options, and that's one of them.
Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you, Chair. The recruitment situation in the legal team is quite a significant challenge. Senior leadership team recognise that is a key priority. and it's on one of the top of our list to try and resolve that in terms of looking at all options, including, you know, where that work is done, what we pay the legal, the lawyers and work for us. So we're reviewing the whole thing as a senior leadership team, and we're hoping to be in a position where we can have a better recruitment campaign and offer out there as quickly as possible. But we recognise it's an issue, and also importantly, just for Mr. Fairbairn's health and well-being, because he's rather stretched at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as I can see, Mr. Fairbairn, the only benefit really is that you must have very short departmental meetings at the moment. But taking the report, specifically turning to the timescales, and I sympathise entirely, but looking at the interaction with the public, you've made reference in 213 to a very specific case that I happen to be aware of, in fact. What I would ask is that if we are clearly unable to meet targets for totally understandable reasons, have we considered more of a communication process of letting people know that that is the case? Because I think a lot of this comes down to expectation management, quite honestly. And if we're in this situation, then so be it. But letting people know that we are where we are, I think is probably far more constructive.
Thank you. Got Councillor Pannell that wishes to speak. He's online.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, at this point, just wanted to ask what mechanism there is for appraising senior executives or senior councillors when something is running well over the time it should take, as Councillor Thomas has just mentioned. Is there a mechanism for drawing that to anyone's attention?
Fairbairn.
I think. Are you saying? Are you asking whether I report to anybody in terms of timescales, or I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Yes, yeah. If, for example, in the case that Councillor Thomas just mentioned, things are going well over the time they should take, is there anybody else you have to inform that that is the case?
No, although I suppose if I was having one-to-one appraisals, then I would be passing the word up that we're having problems with meeting timescales. But no, there's effectively the buck stops with me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's all for the moment, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Snowden.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned under item 214. I've got that one popped out as well. Issue of staffing. This is, it's a pretty grave one actually. I really hope that following, effort redoubled. Legal people which we need, and and in saying that, just as well that this bit's going out, because in saying that, I'd pay tribute to Mr. Fairbairn, because he's pretty much been he's been the only face of legalese within the council. Whether you're if you're on a licensing panel, then he crops up there. He's obviously the monitoring officer, dealing with lots of meetings, and he's got the onerous task of dealing with all the ramifications of FCC, which is which is pretty much a full-time job in itself. So, I mean, as Councillor Pannell and Councillor Thomas have said, I am also familiar with the situation that's been referred to. I think probably if as a council we'd been more upfront, to say that we just didn't have the resource and let them know that, then I think they would have possibly accepted that a bit better. But anyway, I would, I hope we've got you pretty good health insurance, because you're the one. The other question, which I do have on just a brief one, under 2.16, it says that complaints are now being monitored through the council's Liberty Create system. Could you just explain what Liberty Create is?
Yeah, Liberty Create is a complaints management system, so that it's essentially up till this point, until fairly recently, it was for corporate complaints, but we've now got a process in Liberty which will allow us to track standards complaints, because standards complaints, as you know from the policy and procedure, have a number of defined steps. So those steps have now been built into Liberty Create. So there's one single source rather than a number of folders and files within a filing system.
Right, thank you. Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you. It's a point that Councillor Smurden has just brought to everybody's attention. I was going to go back to Councillor Panel in terms of what Mr. Fairburn said. In terms of actually, I monitor those complaints every week. So every week I look at all open complaints in the system, see what's overdue, see and if necessary get heads of service such as Mr. Fairburn on a call on a weekly basis to say, why have you got these complaints overdue? What's the issue? How are you going to get it resolved? And I do that on a weekly basis, looking at all council complaints. So now that they're in the Liberty system, I'll be able to monitor those as well. So answering your question, Councillor Panel, I'm monitoring Mr. Fairburn on a weekly basis.
Right, any other question?
Thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you. I really welcome this report, especially because it didn't need to be produced. And it's been produced voluntarily. So I think I'm a great believer in transparency. And I think this is what transparency is about. So thank you very much for producing it. I did have a couple of questions, the first of which was, who are the independent persons? But I'm glad I didn't ask that. So I won't. The next question was on 211. It talks about policy and procedure. Excuse me. And it says that the policy and procedure was last reviewed in 2019. In view of the increased numbers of complaints and the increased expectation of complainants who will have made the complaints, is that something that is going to be reviewed, or is it caught up in another set of reviews or legislative documents that we're reviewing generally anyway?
Very good question, and very timely. It is caught up in another review. It's part of the review of the Constitution. Because one of the documents that I'll be inviting Council to consider is a council complaints process, and incorporating that into the Constitution, whereas this policy and procedure sits outside it, and it's a very substantial document, and in fact at times we found it to be unworkable. So what I'm done with the process is I've essentially, it's a very similar process to what we have at the moment, but I have suggested that there is consultation involving a panel of members at the informal assessment stage, so that will allow members to have more oversight of what is coming through by way of standards complaints, and can understand the volume and the type of complaints, and allow members to take some more ownership of the process. So you'll see that when the draft constitution is rolled out. It's a shorter process, but the document itself reflects the LGA's guidance on handling standards complaints, and I think it should be an easier read than the current policy and procedure.
Okay. Thank you. Just one further thing which has been touched on, but I did want to mention it again, is this round robin email that went out to all councillors about a particular complaint, and our not responding within timeframes. It's quite disappointing as a councillor, I feel, to have heard from the resident that this was an issue. Right? Well, I wasn't going to say what it was because I didn't want to identify it, but yes.
I don't think that's to do with standards. That's an FOI, I think. That's a different kettle of fish.
Talked about complaints. The complaint was that we didn't respond to the request for information.
But that wasn't a complaint against a particular councillor. This is a complaints
Oh, okay,
against.
right.
This is a complaints against particular councillors as opposed to complaints against the council.
Okay.
That is a separate procedure.
Okay.
Right. Any other question? In that case, could we move to the recommendation on the paper? In view of the, I think it would be helpful to add to the. Sorry.
Chairman, I have asked if I could speak.
Oh, sorry.
Have you not? You come into the debate first.
Is this still a question, or?
No. Sorry. If you're going to debate the recommendation, that's fine. I'll wait till the members have had their say. Thank you.
Okay. So the recommendation is on the paper. Is recommended that the committee notes the contents of the report, but I'd like to propose from the chair that we add to this wording and requests a report to the next meeting on the progress of the recruitment of further lawyers to enable the standards provisions be implemented within the time periods set out in the policy and procedure document. I'll repeat that. And request a report to the next meeting on the progress of the recruitment of further lawyers to enable the standard provisions be implemented within the time period set out in the policy and procedure document. Do I have a seconder for that? I have a second, Councillor Smurden. So we'd like to debate this. Members wish to speak to the recommendation. Councillor Panel, do you wish to speak?
I do, Chairman, if that's with your permission.
Yes, please do.
I need to sort of declare a personal interest in that it touches on a member of my family slightly and a parish council with which I'm closely associated, but I'm sure Mr Fairbairn will step in if he feels I'm overstepping the mark. I can assure him that I will talk in general terms, not in any specifics, and this is about the performance of the council that I'm addressing. And is that okay if I go on now?
As long as it's not too long, and could you please just
I'll try and be
speak to the recommendation and that's being put to the committee?
Yes, indeed. I just wanted to make councillors aware of one particular case. I appreciate that the legal department has been under considerable strain over the past couple of years, and this is certainly not a criticism of any particular officer, and certainly not Mr Fairbairn, who actually wasn't in post when this particular case started. But I would like to make members aware of the significant impact that delays can have on third parties who have to rely on the council to determine standards complaints. The figures for the response time to complaints conceal some truly dreadful failings in this area. There is one case concerning a parish council which took 17 months to determine. I won't go into specifics, but it took South Hams 1 year and 1 week to reach a decision on complaints concerning a member of the parish council concerned. It then took a further 5 months to determine an appeal against the findings by that member. That's 17 months from the complaint being made until the resolution was reached. And that was 17 months of absolute psychological torture for some members and the officer concerned. The delay caused severe psychological problems for some who had to seek medical advice even. And eventually one member of staff resigned their post because of the delay in addressing this. Much of this could have been avoided if SHD had responded in a timely manner. And while the delay was occurring, there, as has been pointed, there was little communication to the complainants from the council. Having been promised a resolution within days in September 2020, nothing was heard further until one of the complainants raised it with the council in December that year. The standards guidelines I see that we have quoted here state that cases should normally be determined in 8 weeks, not the 75 weeks this case took. Following the resolution of this, the parish council and one of the members then made a complaint against South Hams Council about the length of time the case had taken, only for the council to take another 6 months to formally acknowledge its failings in this area. The complaint was lodged in August last year and included a reference to the fact the council had twice failed. Our council, the South Hams Council, has twice failed to respond to requests for information about how to make a complaint of this nature. In the December, there was an oral apology for the council's failings and the promise of a written apology to follow, but again, nothing was heard until March, when the complainants asked why this hadn't been received. The council's own complaints guidelines state that complaints should be addressed within 30 days. This took 6 months and a prompt from the complainants for this complaint against SHDC to be resolved. I'll just conclude. The key point is that the council's failings have serious consequences for the health and well-being of those involved, and in one case, their career. It cannot be right that we can fail so comprehensively. If one of our South Hams council officers had made a complaint against the conduct of our members, or one of our members, will we seriously tolerate a wait of 17 months for this to be addressed? I think not. I don't want to go over what's past, but I would like to see that we take steps to prevent it happening to anybody else. What I'd ask is your committee consider the means by which delays of this nature can be more effectively managed. Certainly we should have targets for concluding such cases within a set time. And if that proves to be impossible, there should be regular updates, as we've heard. We've heard there are regular updates to Mr. Molyneux, a senior member of the management team, and perhaps the chair and vice chair of Overview and Scrutiny, to appraise them of the circumstances and what steps are being taken to address that delay. And perhaps there should be a protocol for regular communication with the parties involved, perhaps at least once a month, so they can understand where things stand and give some assurance the delay is being addressed. And finally, I think I agree, it's absolutely vital the legal department has the resources it needs to function effectively. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Can I just, I'll address the points that you made in your, in a moment, but there is on the screen the proposed addition to the recommendation. It requests a report to the next meeting on the progress of recruitment of not future lawyers, further lawyers, to enable the standard provisions be implemented, standard provisions be implemented within the time periods set out in the policy and procedure document. Before we move on to the vote on this, unless any other member wishes to speak, can I just deal with the proposals that have been put forward by Councillor Panel? For those, Mr. Fairburn, stop me if I'm speaking out of turn, but in the revisions to the Constitution that will come before full Council in May, it is being proposed that the matter of standards be transferred to the Audit Committee. There is a proposal that will be within the amended Constitution, that in fact it's the Audit Committee take on the responsibility for dealing with standards. That being the case, and if that is approved by full Council, then I think rather than this committee start any work on that, I think it's perhaps one of the items that will need to be addressed by the Audit Committee after full Council, if that amendment is passed. Mr. Fairburn, could you just confirm that is one of the proposals within the revised Constitution?
Yeah, that is indeed correct, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Chairman, a quick question, please, following on from what Councillor Panel has just said and what I alluded to Mr. Fairburn in my peroration earlier on. Mr. Fairburn, could you just confirm, under 211 policy and procedure, which we've said is now going to be wrapped up into the Constitution, will you be giving thought to the comments that Councillor Panel has just made, and indeed that I made, regarding consultation and communication throughout the process? I appreciate that can sometimes take longer than you want it to, but it's better to manage expectations.
I entirely agree with you. It's important to manage expectations. And yeah, I mean, I accept that communication wasn't what it was or what it should have been. What I would say is that when one's under pressure, it's one of the first things that goes out the door. So, but yes, I accept it's important, and yeah, we will look to. I mean, what we'd ideally like to do is just deal with things within the timescale.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we'll proceed to the vote. The recommendation is on the screen. All those in favour? Those against? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. So, next item on the agenda is outside bodies.
Can I come in, please? I want to speak, if I may, under
What
this
is this
item.
on, Councillor Pennington?
Under this item, okay?
Well,
And I have not spoken to any other member on this, but I do
Councillor
ask
Pennington,
for
I think we've
support
concluded
on
that
this
item.
one.
I asked on several occasions if any member wished to speak, and you didn't indicate that you wanted to speak.
I did, but you didn't hear me.
Was it?
But anyway, I wish to speak and so on. And I wish to speak under this item, under implications, which come under pages 47 and 48, and in particular come under financial implications to include reference to value for money. That's one of them, that's on this paper, page 48, and also health, safety, and well-being. And this is in connection with the lack of garden collection.
No, Councillor Pennington, no,
Why
sorry.
can I not?
Sorry,
do-
please.
But why
no,
am I not
please,
allowed
that
to
is
speak
nothing-
on it?
that
We
is-
agreed.
With respect, Councillor
No,
Pennington.
Chairman,
No, that
we
with respect,
agreed as a
this
council
is nothing
that we
to
would
do
reinstate
with
it
standards.
in spring of this year.
Councillor Pennington,
Nothing
if you do
has
not,
happened.
if you do
This is,
not,
this is
I
not
will
on
have
its
to ask
own
you to leave the
democratic.
meeting.
Whether you agree with
I
me,
will have to
Chairman,
ask
or
you to
not.
leave the meeting.
Or
If
can
you
I
do-
not just say
No.
a few words?
No, no, please.
Well, this is shocking.
Well, I'm sorry, but it's not
It
on
is
the
shocking.
agenda. It's not on the
Councillor
agenda.
Hawkins had a good article in the
Sorry,
newspaper this
please,
morning
please.
about value for money. This is shocking.
Councillor Pennington, I don't want to have to ask you to leave the
Can
meeting,
I ask
so
you
please
then,
desist.
can
No.
I ask you, what can I do? If it's not it's just slanging me off.
No.
I'm just being.
Sorry,
I'm
I'm
not
moving
even
on
a-
to the next item on the
put a
agenda.
point of view for members to consider.
Right, I'm moving on to the
And
next
for the
item.
general
Sorry,
public
if
to
you don't,
consider.
I will have to ask you to leave the meeting, Councillor Pennington. Right, next is outside bodies.
First time I've ever walked out of a meeting in 40 years.
Right.
I'm walking out now. It's shocking.
So, outside bodies, there is a report. I see that it's Councillor Pearce, you're
You allowed
the,
that man at the end there to speak for ages. I tried to come in. No, you can't come in.
okay. We start, if we deal with the outside bodies, what I'm going to do is to ask Councillor Spencer, who was the chair of the Task and Finish group that gave rise to the recommendations that are reported in the report. I'll ask him to say a few words. I know that that Councillor Abbott also who was on that Task and Finish group, wants to say a few words. And I think after they've had their say, there will be an opportunity for questions and then comment. So, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chairman. As as just been said, I was the chairman of this outside bodies task and finish group. We had one meeting, and it was a very constructive meeting. We produced 6 recommendations from that meeting, one of which is referred to here, which is about the production of an annual report regarding the appointments and so on. There were 5 others, in fact, which I can't see have actually been looked at here particularly. But the recommendations, apart from this one here, were for individual members to inform ward members when matters specifically related to their local wards were discussed at an outside body meeting. And the reports ought to be produced by representatives of those outside bodies which explain the decisions made and how the council will be impacted or its residents. And generally to provide more information to ward members. They were also to pass on information, which I think is largely done, and those reports, the reports that the representatives would produce, if anything related to ward members, would be shared via the members' bulletin. So the report, when I looked at the responses to the 3 questions that were asked, which are identified in 2.4, the Appendix A, the responses from members were, in the main, fine, they answered the questions, but they were slightly disappointing, I thought, in that they didn't necessarily, some didn't answer the questions at all. So I think my overall summary is that this was something which I thought had been accepted across the board, and apart from the annual report, I'm not sure has been implemented. Sorry, apart from the annual report and the passing on of documentation from meetings or distribution. And I think I'd perhaps like to ask the committee how they feel that the questions were answered in Appendix A, and is there any requirement or need to revisit the requirements that were set out in that original report? Should we be considering doing it in a different way without starting up another task and finished group? And I just would ask for the committee to consider what they've got in front of them and relate it to what was originally recommended. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now ask Councillor Abbott to say a few words because it was his, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Abbott, but I think you put forward a motion to cancel what started this process. So if I could ask you just to say a few words, as you were not only, it was your original proposal, and I think you also sat on the task and finish group. If you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. I'm grateful for this first attempt at summarising feedback on the work of councillors of the outside bodies, which they have given some of their time. From the report in Appendix A, it is clear to me that I have been fully aware of some of the reports from councillors, and others must have passed me by. Despite an operational requirement to inform ward members of items affecting their ward, I don't remember any item coming from a councillor that affected Ivybridge East. This year's questions are very simple. Each starts, how many times has each organisation met since last May? How many times did the council's representatives attend? How many reports were received and circulated? The whole summary could have been answered by single-digit numbers. The outside body's reporting form actually asks for something more. It asks for key points arising from the meeting of interest and or relevance to the council. Issues, if any, on which the views of the wider membership and lead officers are sought. And relevant documents, for example, reports and hyperlinks. I had originally hoped that a simple annual summary would benefit from the experience of the relevant councillor to summarise our value to the body and their relevance to us. I am grateful for this first small step to summarise the work undertaken by councillors, yet I ask for more. I ask each representative applies his or her intellect to explain and justify the link we have. Therefore, as a second step, now I suppose for next year, to answer the questions above, thus I suggest a recommendation. And is it appropriate that I read this out at this point?
Yes, please do.
My proposed recommendation is the 2023 annual summary to outside bodies addresses the questions. I repeat, key points arising from the meeting of interest and/or relevance to the council. Issues, if any, on which the views of the wider membership or lead officers are sought. Relevant documents, for example, reports and hyperlinks. Question, statement.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Right, I ask members if they have any questions or comments on the report or the submissions made by Councillor Spencer and Councillor Abbott. Councillor McCall. I can't come to that yet.
I notice in some of the commentary, the third column, the answers to questions, I suppose, the phrase "not for reporting" is used quite a lot. What does this mean? Does it mean that the meetings are confidential? Because in other places it does actually say these meetings are confidential. Not for reporting, what does that mean?
I think it probably means that there's confidential items that can't be disclosed.
Okay.
Right, any other questions or comments? No.
In terms of the relevance to this council body, there's virtually every one in there we have a statutory duty to apply a representative. So we haven't really got a, we can't really decide whether they're relevant or not. If we've got a statutory duty to supply a representative, we've got to supply a representative. So the question of whether or not it's relevant for us to apply a representative doesn't apply.
Yeah, I think the point being made by Councillor Spencer and Councillor Abbott, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's the reporting that's a concern as opposed to whether or not we should have representatives on those bodies.
Absolutely. I'm not addressing whether we should be represented. No. That wasn't part of the brief. The brief was, and it was specifically excluded from memory. I think Councillor Abbott has expressed it far better than I ever could. But the best way I would express it is that we agreed that we were going to do what this report said. And I think in the main, we haven't done all of it.
Talking about the relevance of the outside bodies to the council, so there's an option whether or not we send them.
Yes.
Councillor Abbott.
The fact that we might be obliged to go doesn't mean that there's any relevance. And the fact that we are obliged to attend a body doesn't mean that there's any relevance to the council of that attendance. They are two separate items. But if it can be justified, justify it by a sentence. That's all I'm asking. Tell me why it's relevant. I've only ever tried to understand what's going on.
Okay. Right, so what is being the proposal that Councillor Abbott is not on the committee, so he is not in a position to put a proposal to this meeting. Just wondering whether Councillor Spencer, are you prepared to put the recommendation that put forward by Councillor Abbott? Perhaps Councillor Abbott, you'd just like to repeat it again, what you were proposing. Oh, it's there on the screen, yes. Right, so the recommendation is on the screen. Councillor Spencer, would you like to propose that?
I don't think that's quite what I'm saying, but I'm struggling a little bit, I must admit. When I read the original recommendation, which goes back to the 1st of April 2021, we made some specific recommendations. So all I'm asking is that those recommendations which were made at the time and were accepted are now actually done. Does that make sense?
What you're proposing is that the recommendations that were put forward a year ago by the Task and Finish Group, and which appear not to have been implemented, be implemented in the forthcoming council year.
That's what I'm saying. I think we've all, and I include myself, kind of forgotten what we agreed, because we've all been dealing with really important subjects. And this may not appear to be so, but it is. It is relevant in the sense that there are things here which could affect local ward members, which local ward members need to be told about, and not just annually, at the time. Yes, I'm saying, can we stick to the original? Can members please stick to what was agreed?
The proposal that's going up on the screen is that the specific recommendations arising from the Task and Finish Group in March 2021 and approved by this committee be implemented in the coming year.
I think that is what it says on the tin, yeah.
Okay. Is that your proposal? Are you happy with that? I'm happy to second that. Yes. Right, does any member wish to speak for or against? No, in that case we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Hold on.
Point's been made as to whether or not that should be a recommendation to council, on the basis that it's a direction from council that the outside bodies report should
be. Yes. So this is a recommendation to council.
Even though it's already been agreed.
Yeah, I think it gives an opportunity to reinforce what was previously agreed.
Well, I'm doing reinforce.
Yes. Yeah. Mr. Fairburn, are you happy with that as far as the legalities are
Yes,
concerned?
I'm happy with that, Chairman.
Okay, fine. In that case, are you happy with that, Councillor Spencer?
Yes, it's the way to do it.
I think it has to be, yes. Okay. Right, all those in favour? All those against? No. Okay. Right, okay. It's 16:25. Should have finished by 4 o'clock. We're 25 minutes over. We've still got 2 items left on the agenda. I'd like to propose from the chair that this review of the Section 106 monies be postponed until the next meeting, unless a member has a desire to discuss and debate that now. Councillor Hawkins, you want to debate it?
I certainly don't want to debate it. I was just going to say, because Alex isn't here and Rob Sekila's not here, it would be a good idea for that to be rolled back.
Yeah. Okay. So are members happy to postpone this, to have this matter dealt with at the next meeting? Okay. We all agreed? Yes? Anybody object? No? Okay. Right. Annual work programme. Oh, sorry, I'm too keen to get this meeting finished, aren't I? It's not on my screen. Task and Finish. Right, Task and Finish group. Let me go back. Agenda. Oh, it is. Yeah, sorry. It doesn't. 1 second. Right, it is. Yeah. Yes. Right, Task and Finish group update. This shouldn't take very long. Councillor Smurden, would you like to report on that?
Well, we received feedback from the executive that they wish us to be more... Yeah, we've received feedback from the executive that they wish us to be more specific in our identification of exemplar projects. So what they specifically require from us, from each individual member of the Task and Finish group, is one exemplar project which we can recommend to the executive. And Councillor Birch and I will, we've got a template for that, which I will forward out to you. So if you can finesse down your, several members put forward several projects, if you can sharpen it down to one and give us some guidance as to why exactly you think that one is a particularly good one. And then we can submit that to the executive. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's right. But this is just for this is for members of the Task and Finish group who dealt with the housing issue. This is not to all members of the committee. This is just to members of the Task and Finish group. The executive, in considering the recommendation, requested further information, and Councillor Snowden and I will provide them with that further information. It means communicating with those members who sat on the Task and Finish group. So that's just for noting. Yeah. Okay. Right. We move on to the annual work programme. Right. Right. The annual work programme, an updated version was sent out this morning by email. So as a result of the meeting this afternoon, on the meeting of the 16th of June 2022 will be the addition of the 106 report and also the addition of the report concerning the recruitment of the lawyers as arising out of these standards item. You'll see at the bottom of the amended work programme that to be added to the programme is the Southwest Ambulance, a report from them that was discussed at the last meeting. We're seeking to bring them along. Don't think that we can fit them in until the 21st of July. They have been contacted. Mrs. Long, do you want to just report on where we are on that?
I contacted the ambulance service again and was...
From the Devon Building Partnership, of which is responsible for the council's functions in respect of building control. There have been discussions concerning them coming along to give a report on the building control functions and responsibilities of this council and how that is dealt with by the partnership. So that will, with your agreement, that can be slotted into the meeting on the 21st of July 2022. We all happy with that? Yes. Yeah, Councillor McCarthy.
There's a couple of other items that I wondered whether could be included. I think it was mooted at one point that we look at the Southam's Chapel development and the cost of the affordable homes, viability of it. This was, I think, something we could look at and discuss. I think Councillor Brazil brought it up at the last meeting. And the other item that hasn't come up for a while, I think, is climate change and biodiversity. I thought this was coming back on a regular.
I think that should come under one of the theme reports. I'm not certain when that comes back. I think it's 6 months after the last. When I think we dealt with the climate change theme.
I mean, from the last time it came here, then the start of, or is it? And that's, or is this finished? And then.
So, Sheriff, through you. So, the idea is that every 6 months we will be coming back with a thematic update on same topic. So effectively, if you look at saying it's currently in the 8th of December, which might be slightly longer because of course we don't meet every month. So we're trying to get, fit them in relation so that we're doing them on a cyclic basis, but of course we don't meet enough times for that.
Yeah. As far as the first item, I think what you need to do is could you make a formal request for that to be considered at the next meeting on the 16th of June, for it then to be incorporated with the possibility that if the committee agreed to it being incorporated within the work programme, it can be. But I think members would need some further information. So if you could do
a formal request is made how?
within,
an email
it's
to
all
yourself?
set out in the Constitution, but
I'm sure.
which friend you was
it can be dealt with by way of a email set to the chair and vice chair. Okay. Yes, who can?
I was going to raise this at the beginning of the last meeting. I don't know when is the right time to make it, probably in the anyway, we discussed better lives for all at the particular community wellbeing, and what I wanted to raise was that subsequent to that meeting, Councillor Jackson, Brazil and myself went to see the Kingsbridge Care Hub, which is seemed to us to embody all the best practical principles of what we heard being discussed then at that last meeting, particularly in relation to disadvantaged members of the community. The Kingsbridge Care Hub being a small charity which helps older people, vulnerable adults, families and carers thereof, and is diversifying to be involve bereavement counselling, complementary therapies, clubs, etc., etc. And the reason I mention it is that we wondered about them giving a presentation at some point on the excellent activities that they do, because it seemed that it did fit what Councillor Hawkins and others were mentioning at the last meeting. So I don't know where that might fit in.
Well, can I again just repeat what I said? I think I think you need to make a request to. I suggest it be directed to the chair and vice chair of ONS for consideration to be included in the work programme. I think that's there is actually a procedure set out in the Constitution, as that's undergoing change at the moment. I want to.
I'm in the process of just doing an email to Councillor Mackay. I'll now include Councillor Mackay.
As to what to do. There is a procedure, so follow the procedure. Okay. Right, Councillor Thomas.
No, Chairman, I'm fairly confident that Mr Fairbairn won't need to email me, because I'm going to ask through you, please, Chair, ask Mr Molyneux when we can enjoy the delightful pleasure of FCC at our next ONS. When will they be next before us, Mr Molyneux? Because I think if Councillor Pennington were here now, he would be very keen to hear the answer to that question, as it would give him an appropriate forum to ask them his questions.
Deep breath. My view would be, as members know, that there's a waste working group in place. I think the executive, waste is an executive function. I would suggest that, and I would have suggested to Councillor Pennington, put a question to the executive for the next meeting. It's up to this committee as to whether they want to request the pleasures of FCC.
Mr Fairbairn, would you include me, please, in the email that you just said you were going to send? Because I feel that I may need to be emailing myself.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Molyneux.
Okay, so do we approve the draft annual work programme as slightly amended? Yes, all agree? Okay, fine. We all agree, yes. Just before we close, can I just make a very short announcement and then I'll close the meeting? This is my last ONS meeting. This is the last ONS meeting I will chair, and I will not be putting my name forward for election to this position at the forthcoming council AGM. Having been chair of the committee for just under 3 years, I wish to thank you all for your contributions during our meetings. I give special thanks to Councillor Spurden for all his valuable assistance both in and out of all the meetings. Thank you, Peter. A special thank goes to the officers for their support, and especially Steve Molyneux, Janice and Darrell. You've all been a great help. Thank you, and I will now close the meeting. Thank you.